welcome to another edition of Listen Up. I am your host, John Dowl. Good to be with you again. And I have a co-host, Miss Tara Drayton, who is actually recording and running the show. Hello, Tara, and good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, John. Hello, everyone.
Glad to do it. Like I said, whenever I have a co-host, it's always less work for me, so I love it. I just love it. And we have Miss Fancy Terrell joining us. Fancy, when I saw that name, I'm like, why does this name ring a bell? Why does this name ring a bell? And I could not place a face with the name. And when I saw you, I'm like, oh, that's why. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you again, John.
Oh, yeah, always. And thanks for joining us. You see your bio, and it's rather impressive and rather lengthy. We've worked together in the past. What was Virginia Organizing? When you were with them and you got me to join and do some stuff with them. And it says right now you are local project director for Petersburg Healthy Option Partnerships.
I am, yeah.
Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so the Petersburg Healthy Options Partnership, also known as PHOPS, is a CDC funded grant. We have it's a 5-year grant. Technically next year is our final year, and we'll be reapplying and hopefully get the same funding again from the CDC. Our work is focused in the city of Petersburg, and we have 3 main foci: food access, healthy food nutrition standards across the city, as well as active transportation for people across the city to get them to everyday destinations, including some of those options that we talk about around food access.
Healthy options. Why is that important?
I think the healthy options is an important distinction to make. We don't live in a city where some parts of the city have the same access to healthy foods as others. Yeah. We also live in a city that is disproportionately challenged by ownership of personal transportation. We also live in a city that is not designed to be that walkable for people that are traveling from their homes to some of the stores, which tend to be on the outer skirts of the city. When we're talking about active transportation and when we're talking about food access, we're really just talking about another form of social justice, the same work that you and I were doing together years ago with Virginia Organizing.
Yeah. You mentioned access. Everyone not living near a store where, I guess, grocery store, what have you, where there are healthy options. Do you think it's necessary that every neighborhood has a grocery store, or just a store period where there's something other than potato wedges and fried chicken and mac and cheese and maybe some string beans?
I think that this is a nuanced question because we have so many different types of living situations and conditions.
Okay.
So I think that for some areas, yes, the answer is more stores. I think that for some areas, the answer is, can we learn to grow more? I think in other areas is, can we learn to barter? And overall, I think that just critical thinking and thinking about the intersections that poverty creates will help to create a plan that will suit a community in all the facets that it needs to be supported. So while I do think that more stores are needed in areas like Petersburg, I also identified that there was power before stores were created and people were able to eat food and exchange food. And now, being that we have more access to transportation, we have access to social media, we want to make sure that we are giving people options, not just to go to the store, but also learn how to garden, learn how to network, how to build networks within your community, learning how we can utilize corner stores and mini markets to our benefit. So that way, rather than some of the things that you mentioned before, having a wider selection. I don't want to make anybody's food choices for them. Right. But if someone wants to invest more time in their food choices, and if someone wants to expand and try different foods that maybe are outside of the realm of comfort at this point, I want them to be able to have that option. And I think that has a direct reflection on our physical and our mental health.
You mentioned bartering and growing your own. The neighborhood I grew up in, we had a garden and we would grow whatever. One year we had corn every year we had tomatoes, and I don't know why, because I don't like plain tomatoes, but everybody I know that has a garden, they're always excited about growing tomatoes. I don't
Yeah,
get it, but yeah. And cucumbers, cabbage, greens, just different things, string beans. That Tara, see you grinning over there. I asked you for a minute. And the bothering part for me was I'll pick a cabbage and maybe give it to one of my friends' mothers or fathers, and we would give some whatever we had,
that's right.
cucumbers or string beans or whatever, to some relatives, and then somebody would, or another neighbor, and then someone would give something to us.
That's
You know,
right.
just exchange. Hey, I got this, but no, mine didn't, or the neighbors up the street didn't turn
That's
out so
right.
well, or theirs were better than ours. So, and we just
Hmm.
exchanged.
And what you're illustrating also is a built-in
Yeah.
community network. You're talking about developing relationships. So
Mhm.
this is not just the singular facet of, do I have access to healthy food? Do I have access to my own community?
Yeah.
You know, now we live in such a retail, commercialized based society where when you run out of something, the idea is to go to the store. The idea is to get in your car and drive to the store. We're
Yeah.
not thinking about the damage that it's doing to the environment, all
Mhm.
this, single person traffic that happens. I think it's something like 50% of all US traffic is less than 3 miles from their home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you think about a neighborhood like the neighborhood that I live in here in Petersburg, it was traditionally white. I live in the end of a cul-de-sac. I'm pretty sure I was not designed to be the person that lives in this home. But what I do know, what I have learned is that it's hard for people to get in and out of my neighborhood, right?
Right.
So it was considered a privilege to live farther away from what was going on at the time. But it also
Right.
means is that it's impossible for me to walk to any store because
True.
of
It is.
racism,
It is.
It
That,
is.
and the neighborhood that you live in is very hilly, and the closest store is not exactly close. So if you want to get some exercise, it's a good walk. But then are you going to have enough energy to bring that bag or bags of
Right.
groceries back?
And not only that, you would have to cross 4 lanes of traffic going across Crater
Yes.
Road,
Right.
you know? So it changes the dynamic, even to the point where, in the neighborhood, I grew up in Kenilworth. That neighborhood was a neighborhood where you had to interact with your neighbors a little bit more.
Right.
It wasn't
Right.
as set aside as this one. We had a corner store I could walk to when my grandmother needed me to walk to the store. I can now because there's 16 and 17 years old, but this is the first time that I feel somewhat comfortable saying, hey, can you go to the store and get something from me? Because
Mhm.
it's not designed to be that way. So I think that my work this year, I think the biggest change in my work from when you and I worked together with Virginia Organizing and now is that I am really able to see the intersections of where poverty and patriarchy have and capitalism have destroyed our communities and how
Mhm.
it's had such a huge impact on areas like Petersburg. I can't wait to see what I'm able to think about in the next 5 years and how that's able to affect the work and what
Uh-huh.
continues to grow.
You mentioned growing your own. The church that I belong to, right across, I mean, you could just throw a rock from the church that I worship in across the street. A couple of years before COVID, some guys had a garden. And I mean, they had the nicest looking salad. Don't know who they were and what they did with it, but it was just a nice garden.
Hmm.
On the corner, they aren't there anymore. Don't know what happened to them. And there were a couple of gardens in that neighborhood and throughout the city, but haven't seen it. I guess people, for whatever reason, just got away from it. Or for some people, I guess it's not the in thing anymore to have a little garden.
I mean, I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. We do tend
Mhm.
to be kind of bandwagon folks. But I mean, also, in fairness, I think that our society, our way of life is a grind culture.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
live and work on a hamster wheel. So a lot of things like gardening is a privilege of time that a lot of our
yeah.
friends and family members just don't have in this
Just don't
community.
have.
Yeah.
And
And it's
yeah,
like, and also there's so many other barriers, right? So maybe you do have the time, but maybe you don't have the supplies or the
Yep.
access to supplies or the knowledge or the attention span to get the knowledge in a friendly way that's designed to your learning style. So I think that I'm really trying to step away from like I feel like as Black folks, we, in an effort to improve ourselves, we have a tendency to kind of step on other people like unintentionally. So I'm trying to be more conscious of that in my language and speaking to the best of people. So I think that yeah, we don't see as many gardens as we did, but I also think that life is a lot different, like dramatically different, especially in these past 2 years than it has been.
Yeah.
And it's had a lot of effects on people. I even think that there are people that want to do things like this in this area and don't have access to mental health care and are just having a hard time getting out the bed sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think through these things. I'm privileged to work with really great people that are critically thinking about a lot of these topics and the ways that we can affect them, if it's through social policy, if it's through legislative policy, if it's through art, if it's through just having a good time and creating spaces for us to hang out together. Just trying to attack the issue from as many angles as possible.
Yeah. Tara, you were grinning earlier when I mentioned gardening tomatoes. It's something did we bring back some memories?
No, I have mentioned to Fancy on a few occasions, I am not the person you want growing anything. I don't have the green thumb. I wish I did. So no. Yeah, I leave that to the other people who are better equipped.
I can tell you from watching relatives and friends growing up, you don't have to have a green thumb per se. As far as a garden, you patch the soil, you till it, you get some seeds, you put the seeds in the ground and go from there. You'll know if the soil where you're living is naturally rich, or you may have to add something to it. So that part is relatively easy. It's going back to what Fancy said. A lot of us just don't have the time, or we may have the time, but we may not have the tools to grow a garden. We may not have the energy to clear out that patch of grass or the time to maintain a garden. So actually maintaining it may be the harder part as opposed to tilling up the soil and putting some seed and watering it and getting something to grow. So it can be done.
I had a question for Fancy after hearing about some of the things that you do on a work base. How do you allow yourself the time to kind of unwind from the social justice that you focus on your day-to-day?
My art is a huge relief to me. I dabble in a few different art forms, and honestly, I have to make time for it. I have to make time and put time on a schedule the same way I would if it was this interview or a meeting or a class time. I have to prioritize my mental health and my creative outlets. Because I feel like not only is that an extension of my social justice work, but it's just an extension of me as a person. And I feel very pushed to share my experiences through my creative outlets. And I feel pushed to document myself as much as possible as like a black-bodied person, a Black femme-bodied person rather. In this day and age, I think it's really important that we tell our own stories. There are too many people telling our stories for us. So if it's a painting, if it's a stage performance, if it's writing, if it's photography, if it's talking with friends and sharing ideas, if it's skating, that's me documenting myself. I feel like that's my responsibility.
And can you tell us some of the ways in which you are creative? You said painting, but what other ones do you do?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you can name something and I probably have some type of interest in it. I have some of my paintings here behind me. I do some woodworking and painting. I do some resin casting. I'm a drag king and burlesque performer. I am just a general weirdo. I enjoy skating, and yeah, like I really enjoy making things. That's my biggest outlet. That's my biggest sense of satisfaction. And I see that connectivity between my work, my professional work rather, and my creative work.
So you said you're a drag king.
Yeah.
Does your persona have a name?
Yeah, my persona's name is King Blaze, King with the Q.
Can you tell us a little bit about King Blaze?
Yeah. So I started, I guess I'll tell you a little bit of the buildup. I started in burlesque. I fell in love with burlesque. I was invited to a show, this one particular show called Afro Tease that's run by a local producer and a really good friend of mine. Their stage name is Shantae Chevelle. And I saw the show and I saw burlesque through a lens that I had never seen it before. It was so Black and it was so unapologetic. And it was these femme-bodied people that were on stage and they were creating the rules of what was sexy and what was beautiful. And it didn't have to fit anybody's definition of what was, acceptable or what was good. It was about them and their expression. And I found so much power in being in that audience. It was magical and I wanted to be in on it. Like I want to do this too. So I did. And it was great. But the character that I created was a very femme-based character. And I think that I wanted an outlet for that part of my energy. I'm a person that I celebrate my femininity and my masculinity. I think that's one of the things that makes me a unique person, and just wanting to tap into what I believe is that godliness that we all possess. And I think that some people can identify leaning one way or another, and some people just choose to embrace both. And that's the person that I am. So my original burlesque character was very much based in just very luscious femininity. And I had a lot of fun curating her. But I found it a little difficult to tap into that character as much as I needed to. I felt like I was doing a really good job impersonating other burlesque performers, but I didn't think I was doing a good job representing myself. So during quarantine, I had the opportunity to do a few virtual performances. And throughout those performances, I slowly started to learn more about drag and the history of drag, as well as the history of burlesque. Very briefly, drag and burlesque are very deeply rooted in the Black community. Around the turn of the 20th century, a lot of burlesque performers were even performing at the Apollo Theater. It was a very beautiful celebration of art, and like a lot of things, it was appropriated and brought into the mainstream. So when we think about burlesque today, we have a very white version of it, and no shade to that, but it's really good to go back and remember a lot of the performers that started us. So Lottie the Body, if you would want to Google her, she's an example of one of the original Black burlesque performers of that time that was just incredibly talented. Along the same time that burlesque was popular for Black audiences, drag was very popular for Black audiences also. And my character is very much modeled after some of the 1940s and 1950s drag kings like Stormy Lavigny, who performed the Jewel Box Review at the Apollo Theater. Was literally one of the only queer performers that was allowed to perform at the Apollo Theater. So that was a huge deal. Also Gladys Bentley, who was the singer, held the masters to her own songs and also did her own booking in the North and through the Chitlin Circuit. So these were very powerful performers, and it feels really great to be a part of that legacy, a part of that just real Blackness. It feels like sometimes when I'm on stage, I feel this buzz, and it lets me know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm representing these voices that we don't always get to hear about.
Our guest is Fancy Terrell, a local project arts director with Tara Drayton. I am John Dowl, and this is Listen Up a Minute. Fancy, would you tell us the difference, or is there a difference between burlesque and drag, or is it just a different terminology?
Yeah, there is a difference between burlesque and drag. I see burlesque and drag are both very large tent energies, right? So you have classic burlesque, you have neo burlesque, you have hip hop burlesque and rock and country, and just about every genre of person they're characters that kind of mold burlesque to what they are. So there are a lot of performers that that are very deeply rooted in the classic burlesque that you think of tees and beautiful feathers and things like that. And it's beautiful to see. And then you have performers that are making it something completely new and breaking all the rules. And that's really, really exciting to see also. The biggest difference between drag and burlesque is that more often than not in drag, you will have a person that is, and I'm going to speak in very generalized terms when I say male and female, but you'll have a female impersonating a male or a male impersonating a female. I would ask the individual artist how they identify. I wouldn't want to cast an overall label on anybody in the group because everybody is able to name themselves and identify themselves, but that's the most generalized way that I can explain it to you.
Okay. The first time I had any exposure to that, years ago, a company in Richmond was offering free AIDS testing, and it was at a burlesque club in downtown. Just come get a free AIDS test. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll just go get one just for the heck of it. Well, and what made me get one was my roommate at the time. Every time I turn, hey man, you got a condom? Let me borrow a condom. You got an extra condom? You got any condoms? You got an extra condom? Okay, fine. Yeah, no problem. And he'd go, well, took my AIDS test and they came back, negative. I'm like, well, you're using condoms, why are you getting HIV? I'm thinking, why are you getting HIV test? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I would just get one every year. And this particular year, it was at this club on Gray Street, and you could go see a free burlesque show. Well, they ran out of test kits that day, so I had to get in this wait, and that was fine, but the people were friendly, and there were so many women in there lined up to go to the other room to watch this burlesque. And I'm like, what? What's the attraction? I just didn't get it because I just wasn't interested in seeing male and females dressed up impersonating the opposite. Like,
that's drag. So if you were at a
burlesque drag.
Show,
okay, that's drag.
If you were at a burlesque show, then more often than not, that's not impersonation of the opposite gender. Okay. More often than not. Not making, everybody follows their own rules.
I got you, but generally that's it. Okay.
Right. I think that what burlesque offers is it offers the artist the ability to own their sensuality and sexuality apart from the patriarchal view of what is sexy or what is erotic or what should be used.
I got you.
So this is an artist saying, I want to create this. I want to create this setting. I want to create this theme. I want to tell this story. And this is the way that I want to present and use my body to tell that story.
The thing that like I said, there were so many women that were lined up and they were excited to go and watch this show. And I was with some friends a couple of months ago, and one of the older ladies who was with us, who lived out of state for quite a few years in the Northeast, she said, you all will be surprised at how many women love burlesque and drag shows. And I thought about my time at that club getting tested. And I told her about that. She said, yeah, up in the Northeast, women, it's a big hit among women. They just love to see burlesque and drag shows. And
I would love to hear from Kitara. Kitara had her first drag experience. She's been to a couple of my shows. What was it like for you?
So I saw from the audience, there was a healthy mix of people. I noticed couples coming to enjoy the show, and I would agree wholeheartedly with the definition of burlesque because you got to see each performer's take on exactly what makes
Mm.
them beautiful and uh, how they got to express that on the stage without going complete fangirl. I thought both shows that I went to, they were beautiful and I had a wonderful time. I look forward to the ones coming up in April. I'm not going to say much more because,
Go ahead, say some more.
well, I
That's
really do hope that we put a couple of clips in here for the audience because there are some performers that they elicit a whole lot of reaction from the audience, and it is beautiful to see and witness.
We like reactions.
see that's the thing that, like, again, that's the thing that blew my mind when this person was talking, but she said, you all, now, of course, she's much older than all of us. She has children our age. She said, you all be surprised at the amount of women that really love, they just come and they watch and they really enjoy it. And I'm like, what, just, and I guess just me being a typical guy, whatever that is, like, well, you want to see some person dressed up as the opposite sex impersonating or impersonate the opposite sex. You said, Fancy, that's not always the case. And she said, it's a good show and people really, really love it.
People really, really love it.
Thank you.
I wear a beard on stage, and it is a very empowering feeling to see that part of myself. It almost feels like a different version of me. It's almost like I watch myself in the audience sometimes.
Okay.
It's interesting to see the ways that changing the physical form or like a slightly altering something can throw someone off a little bit, but you see so much more than you ever saw. Even with some of my artwork, if you see some of the people behind me, I like to paint Black women, but I like to paint them in different hues. So what happens when a Black woman, a woman-bodied person in the traditional form that we're used to seeing them, and a Black woman in the way that we're used to seeing them, what happens if we take that away? What happens if instead of this image of what we are so used to seeing or what we're so used to taking advantage of in some cases, what if it's turned on its head? What happens when it looks different? Is it still defined the same way? This is an image of Pam Grier. She's green in the photo, but this is still Pam Grier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to me, by using some of these colors like greens and blues, using colors that reflect the natural resources around us, it reminds us that we are a part of the same earth that we inhabit. It's bringing it right back around to where it belongs. And I feel like I carried some of that into what I present on stage as well.
Fancy, when you were describing it, you almost made it sound like it's no different from going to the theater, if you will, to watch a play.
We have shows at theaters.
Yeah, just, I'm on stage and I'm playing someone else.
That's exactly right.
I'm in front of the camera, but I'm playing someone else. Obviously,
exactly
different
right.
name, different persona, may have makeup, less hair, more hair. I'm playing someone else.
That's exactly right. It's funny, before a show, you'll see the performers come in as their regular selves. We call Harry Potter fans will understand. We come in as our muggle selves, regular everyday selves. And then you go into your dressing room and you slowly see yourself change into your stage persona.
You get into that character.
When you see yourself, demeanor changes. You sit up straighter. It's time. You are that other person.
Showtime,
Honestly, I feel like sometimes being on stage and interacting with the crowd, especially when I'm able to host and just have fun with the audience, it's a really great feeling. It's a really great feeling to feel the energy that folks are passing along in the room. And just also after everything we've been through in this pandemic life, it's good to be anywhere with people sometimes.
Yeah, well, that part, what you just described is as an actor, actress, stage performer, radio host, whatever, talk show host, game show host, pick one. You're just preparing yourself. Okay, I'm getting ready to do whatever, and I'm going to give the audience the very best that I have to offer. Feeling the energy. If you all have ever played sports or you watch sports, and the home crowd, when the home team makes a great stand and the home crowd just roars during the whole timeout, or they get a 5-minute ovation, or they just cheer and cheer and cheer, and the home team feeds off of that.
It's the same thing. In the same way that those athletes train and prepare their bodies and prepare their craft, the same effort and energy comes, and maybe not the same because that's their job. I still got to work, but you know, really,
yeah, I do.
But the same energy, the same practice, the same building out costumes and building out stage sets sometimes, and just physically preparing your body, drinking water, getting rest, stretching, exercising. Like it comes along with its own discipline and sometimes sacrifices.
Okay.
Well, I think we only have a few more minutes before we have to get off. John, do you have any other questions for Fancy?
Yeah, Fancy, it says here as part of your bio that you are a Black ADOS Indigenous mother. Explain that to us, please.
Yeah, ADOS is American Descendants of Slavery.
Okay.
I personally do not know nothing against anyone that's a part of it or claims it. I personally do not identify as African American. I think that there's been too many efforts to erase melanated people's histories and past and lineages. So giving the term African American, while it does note that, you know, the original life was in Africa, so therefore we all are extensions of Africa. I also don't want to continue to perpetuate the myth that Black people only came from Africa. There are Black people in all corners of the globe. And being that so much effort was put into destroying my historical lineage and people that look like me, I'll be damned if I let somebody tell me that I'm only an African American. I can be anything I want to be. And until the historical records prove it, I want you to tell me I'm an African American to my face.
All right, that is going to do it. Tara, thank you so very much. Fancy, good to see you again.
Thank
we'll
you
have
so
to
much.
talk again. This is really fascinating, and whenever you can shed some light and destroy some myths and people's preconceived notions, that's always a good thing. And the social justice thing is always ongoing. You know,
Always ongoing.
It's good to have an outlet to keep yourself mentally strong and recharged, because I always say the people doing the giving and the feeding and the encouraging, they need to be fed too.
That's right. That's right. Well, come to a show and come to a town hall meeting.
All right, I will. Folks,
All
that's
right.
going to do it for our guest, Fancy Terrell, and my co-host, Tara Drayton. This has been Listen Up a Minute. I am John Dowl. Until next time, take care.